Queens Senator Michael Gianaris is a Senate Deputy Majority Leader who led the charge to stop former prosecutor Hector LaSalle from taking control of the state's highest court. He says there's a good reason for it, and we're going to talk about it right now. You thought that he was the wrong fit for the state's highest court, and I'd like you to explain to our viewers why that is.
Sure, and I appreciate you saying I led the charge, but it was really our members of the Senate. He did not have the support in the Senate to make this happen, and that's, we are empowered by the Constitution to advise the governor and then have the responsibility whether or not to consent. Well, we gave her our advice. We gave it to her privately, we gave it to her publicly, and we made it clear that there were concerns about someone who would continue the direction the court has been going in, which many of us find troubling, and yet she chose to appoint.
But here's the bottom line. I think that you made an argument when you and I talked that a lot of New Yorkers could relate to. You think that you told me that you thought it was important for the Court of Appeals to be the counterpoint to the U.S. Supreme Court, which has done a lot of things which have hurt New York dramatically, having to do with abortion rights and gun control and things like that. And you're also concerned about tenants' rights and other things. So maybe you could explain that to people so they could understand why it's so important for a court to have a liberal bent to protecting the people, the rights of the state.
Sure, and look, there's been a lot of discussion about why is this the first time the Senate has stood up and done something like this. But we are at a unique moment in history. First of all, our majority is still pretty new. We're in our fifth year just starting now in the majority, and this has been a process that has generally been a rubber stamp for governors. But at this point, when the Supreme Court is taking our country backwards in terms of the law and devolving a lot of the power back to the state courts become that much more important, require that much more scrutiny. And I think we're just discharging our responsibility to say, let's take a look at anyone that's presented to us, analyze it, and decide if this is in the best interest of the people of the state. In this case, the Senate doesn't think so.
Well, I think we also have to point out that right now the court, if you look at the ideological bent, is like 3 sort of liberal and 3 sort of conservative. So you thought that it was important not to have somebody who leans to the conservative side.
Well, when I mentioned we needed the court to go in a different direction, it's because the previous administration under Janet DiFiore took this court in a particular way that was troubling. There are 3 judges still sitting on that court, Singas, Canataro, and Garcia, who teamed up with DiFiore on almost every major decision, and they've constituted this block 4 versus 3 oftentimes on controversial cases. Justice LaSalle was not making a case that he would change that dynamic, which a lot of us found disturbing. In fact, Janet DiFiore was his #1 reference on his application. So for those of us concerned about the previous administration who wanted to see a better approach going forward, he was not representative of that change.
So Governor Hochul has said that she's preserving her options about whether to sue to force the Senate to bring his appointment to a vote of the entire 63-member body. Do you think she has a sound legal argument?
I don't. She can have her own opinion and decide what she wants to do, of course, but I think it would be detrimental to the business of the state. We have a lot of work to do, and we're anxious to work with the governor on the issues that are coming before us. And I think ultimately it would be futile, because from what I've seen, the votes are not there to
well, so let's talk about the math. The math is that you have 42 Democrats, 21 Republicans. So in order to win, she would have to get 11 Democrats. Are there 11 Democrats in your conference that would vote to confirm him?
I don't believe so. I mean, we're already in the mid-20s people who are publicly opposed to this nomination, and there's only 3 who are publicly in favor. So I don't think the votes are there, which is why we can go through this exercise, create a constitutional crisis about the separation of powers and the obligations of the Senate, and ultimately we'll end up in the same place. So I think we should just get on with the business of the state. We have a lot to do. We want to work cooperatively and collaboratively with the governor, and it's time to do that.
Do you think that she'll try to exact retribution in some way by keeping things in the budget that people might want out of the budget?
I hope not. I mean, look, we're all adults. This is politics. It's a rough and tumble business. We're going to disagree sometimes, and hopefully we're going to agree a lot more times than that. And I think we can handle a disagreement over a particular issue, even a high-profile one, and then continue to do the business of the state.
So in a statement right after the vote, you said, and I'm quoting, "The Senate has now set a new standard in thorough, detailed hearings, an achievement for our democracy and a harbinger of future proceedings." My question to you is this: is it also a harbinger of things to come in terms of the governors dealing with the legislature, that you feel newly empowered to convince her of the kinds of policies and programs that you would like to see?
Well, to be clear, the Senate has always had this power. It just never exercised it. This is constitutional powers and responsibilities the Senate has. Year after year, when there's a confirmation fight in Washington, we all tune in to C-SPAN or wherever, and we watch the hearings, and they rigorously question people. That has never happened in the state Senate before this confirmation. And so part of what we've been trying to do in the few short years we've had the majority is bring some greater credibility and exercise the powers that we already have that previous Senates had not exercised.
But my question is there a new power shift in Albany? Because, you know, there was an op-ed in the New York Post, whether you want to take the Post or not is another story, but they opined that Senate Majority Leader Andrew Stewart Cousins is now the center of power in Albany, that the Senate is now the center of power in Albany. Do you agree with that?
Look, these pundits are trying to sow division. The fact is the governor is the most powerful elected official in the state. She will continue to be, and that's not because of a particular disagreement or how an issue turned out. It's because the Constitution vests that office with significant powers. It also vests the legislature with some powers, and so the balance of that and the separation between those are where we try and do our business.
So you would basically advise the governor, if she was listening, not to take the option of filing suit because it will just get in the way of you dealing with what is a huge level of issues that you have to deal with this year, and, you know, time is running out.
Well, first and foremost, I would advise her not to sue because they're wrong on the law. And to try and infringe on the Senate's constitutional powers in that way and tell the Senate how to do its business is a very dangerous game to play. If she thinks she can do that and she's right, that's her choice. But then it gets to your point, which is we have a budget coming just around the bend, due at the end of March in a couple of months. There's a lot of work to be done in prioritizing the allocation of resources in this state to make sure that the people of the state are protected. And if there's a lawsuit going on in the background during this whole process, it's not going to be productive.
Well, isn't it also ironic that if she were to sue and you were to appeal, it would actually go to the State Court of Appeals, which now only has 6 judges?
It's, you know, there's a lot of interesting questions, but there's a reason why both federally and at the state level, the courts have stayed out of deciding how the legislature should do its work. It's because that is the prerogative of the legislature. We don't want one branch of government telling another how to do its business on a day-to-day basis.
So do you think the process of selecting judges should be changed? Do you think this is a good process?
I do think it should be changed. I know our leader, Andrew Stewart Cousins, has indicated a desire to
How would you change
this. There's a number of things that can be done. I mean, one of the issues that I found interesting was the governor claimed she was constrained by the 7 choices the commission gave her. I got no problem if the governor just gets to pick somebody outright, the way it's done at the federal level, and then we can evaluate it, and there's no...
Isn't there a concern, though, that then politics enters into the selection process?
Let's be clear. Politics is already in this process. So anyone who doesn't think that a commission controlled by appointees of Andrew Cuomo and Janet DeFiore didn't have a political agenda is kidding themselves.
So one of the biggest, talking about politics, is that one of the biggest objections to Judge LaSalle, besides being a prosecutor, was that he took the endorsement, the cross-endorsement of the Conservative Party. Why was that such a big deal? We only have about 30 seconds, but maybe you could answer that.
Look, it's a very big deal because the Conservative Party stands for so many wrong things. They're against gay marriage, they're against LGBT rights, they're against immigrants, and all the things that we stand for as Democrats, they're against. Now, look, the judicial election process, which is what happens at the lower courts, is all screwed up, right? And that's why this happens.
So you want to see change in that way, too?
I would love to, because what happens is the judges end up getting endorsed by all the parties because they make deals among themselves.
Well, I mean, when I go to vote, I see all these judges have like 4-party endorsement. Like, how do you know what party they belong to?
And what happens is the party bosses get in a room and they make deals with each other. I'll give you 1 judge, you give me 3, and they all just cross-endorse each other. It's not the way things should work. If you're concerned,
you want to change.
You're concerned about the governor picking somebody. Right now, we have party chairs selecting who the judges are on the bench. Now, look, the Conservative Party is, because of this process, is a line that a lot of judges have. I understand that, and so we don't want to eliminate 90% of the possibilities. But we've got to do something about holding people accountable, and they should decline the line.
Well, we're going to have to leave it right there for now, but our conversation continues right after the show on our streaming channel, CBS News New York.